Today we're going to be talking about equilibrium. On a fundamental level, this is a more exciting Hollywood spectacle of the book 1984, where people lose all reference points with past and future and only exist in a pre-constructed false reality that is the present. After so many generations have passed and the old world common knowledge is forgotten, it is that much easier for controllers to impress upon the population what should be considered normal. We see that happening today with the rise of globalism and third world cultures slowly being wiped out. Another example would be the Rockefellers, who have been behind the promotion of pills and modern medical practices while making many natural medicines and therapy appear as primitive or even ineffective, because there's not as much money to be made if people actually knew how to be healthy and take care of themselves, instead of just managing symptoms and putting a band-aid on it and saying, okay, you're all right. Of course, human nature goes against anything that tries to control it, because if you have a mind, sooner or later common sense will rear its head and point you in the right direction. And that's the premise of the film, with all inhabitants, except the ruling class as usual, living in equality under a sort of synthetic hypnosis where they are made to deny what it means to be free and to feel. You see, as long as the state exists, none of us are individuals but tools comprised of the general public. As cogs in society, those who manipulate it can get everyone to police each other and make them feel guilty or proud based on conformity. It really is disgusting that, as we are seeing today, our rulers pit us against each other with Black Lives Matter, no, all lives matter, when it is the establishment which is the cause for the divide and the escalation. In fact, most so-called movements are just one in a long line of instruments they abuse and trade in and out for the next. Perhaps next month it will be class warfare between the rich and the poor. After that, safeguarding the rights of the elderly against carefree youth who can smell a hoax a mile away. We know by now that anything that appears on a network as the official story, like 9/11 or the George Floyd drama, has some concealed motive behind it, just like global warming, sustainability, and Agenda 21, if you haven't heard of that, are all tied together. Polls, graphs, and even what are considered to be action scenes are forged all the time to get a calibrated response of some kind. The more we react with emotion, the less we use reason and logic to actually get to the truth. Anyways, at the climax of the movie, when Christian Bale's character crashes into the newsroom, the analogy is a direct reference to today's propaganda, because anyone who turns on any mainstream channel but thinks they're all so different or even in opposition, just like they think the puppet right and puppet left are against each other when really they're controlled by a puppet master, the bankers who have the payroll for each side, has their brain managed by someone else who tells them what the truth is, so no one in the audience ever has to think for themselves. Just as in our real world, all knowledge is regulated, so too are various companies and big business just owned by a handful of men who pass the disinformation along, and it simply filters through all the stations and into the heads of the masses. The hope of all those who are awake, however, but have been lied to their entire lives, like the main character, is that we will enlighten others so that we all can obtain natural liberty and not live under any sort of domination, whether it is claimed to be for our own good, defense, or not. To quote Orwell, the author of 1984, whose words were as true then as they remain now, "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." We have to stop taking our sedatives, as they do in the film. We have become nothing more than docile citizens who protest and march and obey in the prescribed way, conveying how tame we are, like dogs who beg at the master's table for crumbs, acting like servants of states and banks instead of taking what is ours by birthright as human beings. We must stop eating GMO food, laughing at chemtrails, living within proximity of G towers, and voting and letting other people make decisions for our lives, subjecting ourselves to any sort of hierarchy where someone else has authority over us, and so on. But we really have to stop turning on the TV, reading newspapers, and addicting ourselves to magazine articles and social media feeds about whatever government wants from us, what celebrities are doing, caring about the lives of royals, trying to one-up each other on video games, watching the stock market. We are getting to the point of total house arrest, where all we will do is eat, sleep, work, and reproduce within our assigned confines, and we'll just keep worrying about if our bills are paid or our tax allotment. The system does not want you to simply be, because if you were ever truly at peace with yourself and the universe, they would lose their hold over you. And that is exactly why they keep injecting fabricated drama into your life in one way or another. When we ignore the establishment, though, and its plethora of institutions, then happiness will no longer be something we have to pursue our whole lives. When we see eye to eye, compromise, communicate, and cooperate, then we will have equality and fraternity. Of course, the establishment will make us think this is ideal thinking or even impossible. I mean, we could just go on allowing the planted morals and ethics of society literally make us feel guilty for breathing. If someone does ask you about the scamdemic, the plandemic, sorry. If someone does ask you about the pandemic, just say, what pandemic? It's all a joke, and the aristocracy is laughing at us because we continue to act like peasants who hide behind our mask because we're so afraid of putting others at risk for nothing, which I'll get to in the next video. There's nothing to be afraid of. Do you know how harmful and artificial it is to rebreathe the same air for any extent of time? They are disrespecting us and don't want us to be alive unless it is as their footstool. The energy that we put into Black Lives Matter, such as tearing down monuments or statues, whether it really is us or the CIA or FBI just covered up, whoever does it doesn't matter, because in the future, kids will wake up into a world where, to us, racism is common sense, that it's bad, but then if all reference points are wiped out, how are they to know any better if they can't look back in history? They'll just be surrounded by authoritative facts who will tell them what is right and wrong. And there's a really good correlation to be made between one of Orwell's other books, Animal Farm, where over time the lines get blurred, and even a child can understand this book. Like, I think it's something everybody should read before it's too late. But back to the story. Another link can be made to the stimulus checks that we've been getting. The next step after that would be universal basic income, and after that it's socialism, and not too far behind that is communism. And they're not just going to keep giving us money for free. There's always going to be more stipulations and contingencies attached to them until privilege starts to become the norm, and we'll just be surrounded by bureaucracy and jump through any hoop that they put before us and dot any line that they ask of us. And it will be like, oh sure, yeah, your child, when he grows up, can attend this prestigious university, but first, has he or she been vaccinated with however many they want us to take? Oh yeah, you can apply for this job, no problem. First though, do you have the microchip? And yeah, come on in, you can attend this event. But first we're going to need to see a record of your contact tracing history, just for everybody's safety, you know. It's not about control. Again, this might all sound delusional, but I never want you to take my word for anything and just accept it as face value, like the news always wants you to do with all their numbers and stats, whatever. Uh, so, like usual, I'm going to have a recommended reading and an accompanying documentary so you can do the research for yourself and verify it on your own. Today's book is by George Orwell, and a lot of people say it's very prophetic because it may or may not a lot of people know that he was actually part of the elite inner circle back in the day, and whether he wrote this book as a warning or he was very sympathetic to our cause, it's kind of unclear. But he introduces a lot of terms like that we use today, for example, political correctness. He calls it newspeak. Even that has an ulterior motive behind it, because while we think we're being a more liberal culture, a more free society, and people just didn't know any better back then, whatever, what it's really doing is limiting our vocabulary, and you can see how that would give the enemy, our enemy, an advantage over us, because pretty soon we won't be able to say it how it is. We won't be able to say how we're really feeling, what we're really thinking, only in the desired funneled way that government wants us to think. He also has other terms like doublespeak and crime think, and I don't want to give away too much of the book, but basically the crux of the story is so much history gets rewritten that future generations grow up in a world where they're living in essentially a man-made hell, but how are they to know any different? Because that's just usual life for them. And sometimes I tell people, we might not be there yet, but I feel like that's the world we've been born into, but we just think it's normal. The documentary for today, it'll also be in the show notes, is The First Global Revolution, The Biggest Lies in History, Want to Know the Truth. And I know it kind of sounds like a corny title. I'm sure it exists under other names. This is a war documentary, and I'll have many more, because to me it's just so sad that here we think like our military, whatever, is our heroes. The government is the one who tells us who our heroes should be, like our frontline heroes. And I'll talk about that another time too. But here we're led to believe like military is dying for their country, or they're spreading democracy, or go America. Really, the only thing that we're doing is sacrificing for the elites, the ones who run all the banks. War is the most profitable thing that humans can do for them. So, for example, when a war does get started, it's already been pre-planned months, if not years ahead of time. And the elites are just sitting around their table at lunch or dinner, and they have maps before them, and they're just erasing lines, drawing new borders, saying, okay, it's going to take place on this day. Remember, during this battle, this team has to lose and be allowed to retreat. This side has to conquer this territory. We want to make this guy seem to be a supervillain or something. Be sure to introduce this weapon at this time, so the next war, maybe World War III, it'll have more ramifications then. And it might sound unbelievable, like, no way. Just watch it, and watch the other ones that they put out. It'll become more and more undeniable. And anyway, I hope this was helpful. There'll be plenty more videos to come. Take care.